Welcome to Solidarity Talks, a Black-Asian conversation presented by the Asian Pacific American Resource Center at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. Before we begin our conversation, we'd like to start with a labor and land acknowledgement by our student ambassador, Haruka Yukioka.
The University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus is built on stolen Dakota land using money gained from the forced labor of enslaved people. The land that the U is on was forcibly ceded in the treaties of 1837 and 1851. For those of us who are guests on the land we are on, we must understand and carry out the responsibility and the honor to stand with Indigenous peoples everywhere. Spirit Lake, Dakota, Mohegan, and Muskogee artist Marlina Miles has created the map you see on the screen, as well as a website at bdotememorymap.org, that's BDOTE memorymap.org, where you can learn about the significance of landmarks present today, such as St. Anthony Falls and Fort Snelling. We encourage folks to go to nativeland.ca, that's native-land.ca, and learn about how you can support the Indigenous peoples whose land you are on. Additionally, the University of Minnesota Twin Cities exists as we know it because of the forced labor of enslaved African people. In 1856, the university was struggling financially and received a loan of $15,000, which is $484,076 today, from William Aiken Jr., who gained his money through enslaving more than 700 people in South Carolina. Additionally, past Regent Henry Sibley worked for a company that enslaved people, and past Regent John Nichols was an enslaver. The university, as well as many institutions in the North, have yet to publicly and meaningfully acknowledge this debt. To learn more about this history, we encourage you to read Slavery's Reach, Southern Slaveholders in the North Star State by Christopher Lehman.
Thank you for that important acknowledgement. I want again to say welcome everyone to Solidarity Talks, a Black-Asian conversation hosted by Asian Pacific American Resource Center. My name is Kong He, and I am the Program Director for the Asian Pacific American Resource Center at the University of Minnesota. I just want to share a little bit about APARC and who we are and what we do. We are a student resource center at the U of M, where we work to affirm AAPI identity and cultivate community for our AAPI student community at the U. We provide resources, programming, and really support for our AAPI students to thrive on campus. And the University of Minnesota is an Asian American and Pacific Islanders serving institution under the Minority Serving Institution initiative from the U.S. Department of Education. Haruka, would you like to introduce yourself for today, as you will be facilitating part of our conversation today?
Yeah, hi folks, my name is Haruka, my pronouns are they, them, theirs. I am one of the student workers at APARC. I work as the Intersectional Identity Dialogues Student Ambassador. So this event is part of the Intersectional Identity Dialogues, or IID program, which is an initiative by APARC to have nuanced and deep conversations with and for marginalized groups within and outside the Asian American community. What that means in practice is that we go beyond just our racial or ethnic identities. We think about all the different parts that make up our identities as whole, our sexualities, our disabilities, our immigration status, etc. And we work to create spaces that uplift those identities and think about how we can connect to folks who are within or outside of what we consider to be Asian American, because we know that there's no true freedom and there's no true justice if we're not all working together and we're not all challenging ourselves and each other to imagine what that can look like. Kong?
All right, thank you. I don't know why my button keeps unmuting here, but thank you so much for waiting patiently. I also just want to say that today's conversation coincides with a new collaborative Asian American Studies course at the U of M that we've been working very closely with one of our speakers today, Marlina Gonzalez, who will be leading this course, Asian American Studies 3920, Black Asian Solidarity and Community course, where this course will be examining what true Black Asian solidarity can look like, and really focus on unpacking the Black Asian community relationships and narratives that has been going on in our community today. So folks that are enrolled at the U of M, please check out this course for spring 2022. All right, now I would like to introduce our lead facilitator, or lead speaker today, Marlina Gonzalez, who will be kicking off this conversation for us. So Marlina Gonzalez, I'm just gonna give me one moment here so I get this correct. But Marlina is a multidisciplinary arts producer, director, and has over 2 decades of experience using art as a tool for social change. She has conceived and produced numerous international film festivals, multidisciplinary art exhibits and performances for the Walker Art Center, Intermediate Arts, the Minneapolis Foundation, and Asian Cinema Vision, among many other initiatives that she has worked with. She is a strong advocate for solidarity and collaboration, has worked closely with national and local organizations and leaders to strengthen solidarity in our communities. Marlina's most recent work was a collaborative performance with avant-garde rap artist producer David Bullard, also known as Orko Eloheim. Both were artistic fellows for Our Space is Spoken For, a multidisciplinary public art storytelling project produced by Twin Cities Media Alliance. Their collaborative performance, Bamboo Bingo, centered reflections and experiences from community storytellers Davida, Kilgore, along with her personal care attendant and visual artist Mee Thao, around racial and social justice in our community. The collaboration and relationships of Marlina, Orko, Davida, and me serves as the backdrop to our conversation today about solidarity in our Black and Asian communities. I'd like to welcome Marlina, who will introduce the rest of our speakers today and begin the conversation for us.
Thank you so much, Kong. Thank you, everybody, for even we don't see your faces, know you're out there. Thank you for joining us in this circle. I'd like to introduce my cohorts for the project that has been mentioned, Our Space is Spoken For. We created a performance entitled Bamboo Bingo. David Bullard, or Orko Eloheim, was my major creative partner. He designed the auditory experience for Chakam Kali's Rituals of Resistance, which is still on exhibit at the Minneapolis Institute of the Arts that started this summer. David Wali Rahman bin Hassan Bullard, I hope I pronounced that correctly, is better known by his stage name, Orko Eloheim, although we call him David. And he was born in 1975, originally moved here from San Diego, and was an amazing partner and taught me a lot in this experience. Davida D. Kilgore is an award-winning writer, editor, and educator with an international career and a focus on African-American women's issues and expressionistic and intuitive creativity. We will know more about her work at the end of this conversation. And then Mee Thao is an Hmong American emerging visual artist who also works with Dee as her personal care assistant. Mee's experience in interacting with her clients served as a very fertile source of stories in shaping the group's performance entitled Bamboo Bingo. So welcome, everybody. You may now unmute your mics so we can have a conversation. It's just gonna be an example of how the four of us actually interacted in forming the performance that we created and presented at the Central Park Village in St. Paul last month called Bamboo Bingo. And I really want to quote Dee's statement in one of our storytelling sessions, which has really been an inspiration for me and for all of us in pushing forward beyond that performance to continue this work towards solidarity. Dee said, we need safe spaces where we can just have knockdown, drag out between us and talk about the stereotypes we have of each other, where they came from, where they were, why they were invented, and then talk about how we dismantle them. So without further ado, I'd like to launch us into just this 40-some minute, 1 hour knockdown drag out, as Dee described, just as a way of spilling our souls and our traumas and our stress, but also our creative solutions and ideas for how we can live better together. So I'd like to just throw in the first question, and we'll just chat. Why do you think it's important for all of us to unpack Black and Asian community relations today? Because we talked a lot about it in our storytelling, and then things came out of our conversation that some of us didn't even know. But why is it so important? Why do we have to unpack this kind of relationship specifically?
Well, Marlina, I was gonna say, so it's kind of like what the experience of me and Davida have been going through, like because I work with her. It's crazy how this topic is coming on when like I'm Asian, she's African American, and I'm just like I wish people could be kind of like us. We just automatically click right away. We didn't have anything to do with. We didn't even think about our race or anything like that. And I wish people could be like that.
Yeah, and we didn't even know each other.
Huh?
We didn't even know each other when we started.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Things just click. I mean, the agency that me works out of is owned by a Hmong American. All of my PCAs except for one have been Hmong American. I live in a building that's probably 95% Hmong American. And so it's a matter of, I had to dismantle anything that I was possibly going through, because this is who I live with. This is who works with me. I don't consider me working for me. Me works with me. Okay. We do just all kinds of things together. We have art days together. We shop together when I leave the house, which isn't too often. But we have to just have what I said, these knockdown dragouts. And me and I have talked about, why there was the animosity in the beginning. When it felt like all the Asian immigrants were taking over all the spaces that had been formerly reserved for Black Americans. And then that pushed Black Americans further away from the cities, and the affordable housing moved further and further out. And so there was that going on. And then the businesses took over. And so there was a whole lot of animosity building up. But if people would stop and talk and think about what they're having all of these problems about, in relating to Asian Americans and Asian people, we wouldn't have the problems that we've been having. We'd be more like me and me, which is great. I love me some me. Yeah, in Black vernacular, I love me some me.
That's right.
What do you remember about our conversation, David? What do you think? Why is it so important? Why?
I feel like that just echoing what Davida says. It's like, it's too much stuff left up to assumption. And when you do that, you start allowing these propaganda and these agents of agenda, they start working on you. And what I mean like that is that we've all heard negative propaganda about each cultural group in America. Are we falling victim to the mind state that our oppressors putting inside of us? I mean, the first time I've ever heard any kind of prejudice things, I don't even say racist things, you know what I mean? Just prejudice, just weird feeling. It didn't come from any of the quote unquote minority cultures. You know what I mean? So I feel, just to circle the wagon real quick, I would like to say that we have to hold compassion for oppressed people worldwide, globally. All right. We have to start thinking about, I would like us to start thinking about our own oppression when we interact with each other, and know that this is someone that has actually has went through generations of what you've gone through. You know, that it might be in a different form of it, but it's the same. You share a common oppression and a common oppressor.
Right.
Period. And a lot of that BS, a lot of that weird and hateful speech, you learned from them. And you took that and you took it and you threw it at somebody else, some other culture.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a whole like wicked spinning ball of like pain that is just like, whoa. I see it two ways, you know. There's I'll save the other part till later, but that's how I feel. Like we have to create that space of compassion for each other's cultures.
Yeah, no, totally agree. I mean, it's almost a rhetorical question to say, why is it important? Because the answer is, why we're asking this question is, why is it so important? Why do we have to clarify each other? I think, I've lived in New York, I've lived in Houston, I've lived in Manila, and now, Minneapolis and the Twin Cities. And the things like we get defined by our geographies, right? Like in New York, like you're mixing with everyone. There, like you're in the subway and you're like, even pre-pandemic, you're literally breathing into each other's faces and tripping over each other. But here in the state of Minnesota, it's like, unless you go to the lumberyard Hmong market, or unless you go get some soul food along University Avenue, or you shop at Shuanghe or whatever, is when you see all the folks that look like you or don't look like you. Right. And I think the challenge with the state of Minnesota is that we don't really see each other when we walk out the door, because we're all in these enclaves that separate all of us. I mean, other than Davida, because you're living in an apartment that's predominantly Hmong elder assisted living, I live in Southwest Minneapolis, like close to the edge of Edina, where like at one point I remember Minneapolis, St. Paul magazine said, like, if Barbie and Ken were real people, they would live in Edina. I live at the very edge of that. So when I walk out the door, the first few times I lived here, it was Barbie and Ken. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until like in the past few years when I started having neighbors back behind me. Is a Somali family, like on the other side of the street, are African-American families and their little kids playing in the basketball court, behind me. But we don't really see each other. And when we talked to each other, when we started coming together, it was just like, there were things I was not aware of. Like when Davida mentioned, or I think you were the one who said, like, I don't understand why there was a tension between Black and Asian folks, until Davida, you mentioned, well, this is what's happened in Rondo and Frogtown. I heard it happen in North Minneapolis, where like a lot of the folks that were Black owned businesses in North Minneapolis, when it became gentrified, the Asian folks were part of that gentrification. Asian immigrants started setting up businesses in North Minneapolis, so pushed out the Black owned businesses. So there's that tension, but we're not really saying it to each other because there's so little resources, we're fighting over each other.
Right.
So, and Davida, you mentioned that, like, can you share with us again, like when you answered, responded to Mee's question of like, why is there that kind of tension? Like, is there a tension, and what are those forms of tension?
There's name calling, there's ostracizing, there are physical things that happen. I worked for the Neighborhood Justice Center once in my lifetime. I was one of many careers. And we were defending an Asian member of a group. And he had allegedly hurt somebody at a party. He went to a Black party. He was trying to get along, I think, at first, and then it just spun out of control. And epithets were said back and forth, and this Black kid got killed. And it had the community all up in arms when everybody was at this party. He was the only one there. He was the only Asian kid there, period. And it just turned into a brouhaha. You know, they're attacking this poor kid. What else is he gonna do but attack back when they won't let him out of the house? Or they were calling him names. Or even more recently with what happened with the coronavirus and blaming it on the Chinese people, I was feeling like, okay, I can't even send me to the store because people don't know who somebody is. They just assume that all people who look a certain way belong to a certain group of people. And I had, you know, trepidation sending her to the store because I'm like, I don't want anything to happen to her. So I started ordering things online to be brought to the house until things seemed to lighten up a little bit. And then they got drastic again. And I said, never mind, I'll just order things to come to the house. And so that's the kind of thing that I saw that was happening, that things were turning physical, things were being said out of pocket, you know, and it was all like David said, we're all got the same oppressor, we're all going through the same oppression, but trauma sticks with you.
Yeah.
And we've got generational trauma going on. Yeah. You know, and so when somebody is perceived to come in and interfere with what we've accomplished or what we're aiming for, there's an animosity that gets set up against not only the person that you think is taking over your business space, but the whole group of people that person comes from. Mm-hmm. And that's where I saw all the animosity happening.
Right.
Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Or yeah, no, and I think this is more like there's no one answer, and the questions have so many variations. And I think that we really, I mean, honestly, before this project, I was doing community convenings for Twin Cities PBS also, and other projects. I always try to reach out to folks. But unless you actually prompt the group, nobody wants to address that. I think we're all afraid to be at each other because we are already fighting for the smallest resources that are available to Black and brown folks. And like the predominantly white culture then sees us as like, look at the two of them, like, look at them, they're at each other's necks. Like, and I think that part of it is the fear that we want to be perceived that way. But at the same time, it's like, we also don't know each other. I was in a community convening and I was told, and I was the only Asian in a room full of Black folks. And I was told prior to that event that a lot of the people in that group believe that Asians have white privilege. And I'd never heard that before. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that Black folks saw Asian folks as having white privilege, because the general information is like, most of us come here as immigrants to study in a university or to find a better job, or we're brought here by refugees, and so we're rewarded for work, you know, for working in alliance. And so now as refugees, they come, you know, people come here and they have to set up their work, their lives back up and find themselves in the same predicament as the other Black and brown folks fighting with.
Well, there was also the Asian people were seen as the model minority. That was years ago, the model minority. Asians were educated, they were smart, they were excellent at math, just everything you could think of, they were the model minority. So if you were gonna have a minority group around you, you have the Asian group around you. And that was, David, what year did that come out?
Yeah, that you talking about the 90s?
Yeah.
So, you're talking about the 90s, how, you know, the real psychological conquer and divide that happens. You know what I mean? And the heaviest thing is just like, for me, is there's always in every culture, there's diverse people, and that, like, I will explain them as extroverts, and then there's people that are just kind of close to their own community. I'll explain that as introvert. And I feel like those types of things are both needed. You know, you got people that are into the old way and they just don't really mix it up because they just don't really know too much. You know what I mean? But if you want to coexist with anyone, you don't have to try to be diverse. If you're trying to be diverse, then you're probably a fucking prejudiced person. If you have to try to get along with somebody that doesn't look like you know what I mean? Like, when I'm from Southern California, so most of the places I travel around the world are way less diverse than where I come from. You know what I mean? So it's shocking. I've been out here for 10 years. There is a lot of ignorance to different cultural groups out here. And like I was saying, like, yeah, we could probably, you know, there could be a lot of scholars up inside here. This is being held at a college Zoom presentation webinar. But we can't forget about the whole of we, and there's a lot of us that are still ignorant, all right? And there's a lot of us that can still go for the okey doke, you know what I'm saying? And so, like, they're in pain, you know? I feel like those people that with their ignorance, they're really, really, really in pain, you know? But there has been the oppression in all of our communities is not new. You know what is new? The slogans, right. The Lives Matter slogans, and this. It's the same day. It's just a different slogan. You know what I'm saying? You guys might not be in the Asian community, you might not be privileged to the knowledge of the struggle you were going in a generation or two before you were born. If they're inside the Black community, they're probably not privy to knowing the information about the struggle that was going on a couple generations before. I mean, in that situation, they probably do because they got that cold month of the year, February, Black History, Black History month of the year. Where you stay home in your house because it's cold as hell and learn about how people was mashed up. You know what I mean? But those types of cycles of abuse and stuff like that, we got to take a step back. You know, I feel like a lot of, and not to even use the word feel, because I want to take that whole vagueness out. I know that a lot of the problems between our communities are like dealing with space, resources, and kind of like bullshit issues dealing with merchant customer service shit. You know what I'm saying? And that type of thing, like those types of things have to be worked out between the service provider and the patron. You know, respect on both angles, knowing where you at. You know, if I'm providing a service that maybe mostly this type of community is up inside there, maybe you don't want to have your mind open up to a lot of stereotypes. Maybe you want to deal with people on an individual basis.
And I think what you,
yeah, sorry. Go for it, please.
I was gonna say, like, what you're introducing here too is the layer of economics, like the economic aspect of our identities get associated with our skin.
Right.
You know, like certain professions are predominantly this group or that group, and that's where the stereotypes happen. Because if you don't venture outside of the vagaries of that, those boundaries, then you don't know anymore. But I want to bring up something that I know this really pains me, even within my own family and within my own community. There's such a strong racism against Black folks that I have seen up close, even within my own family. And I think that part of that too, like, I'm an immigrant from the Philippines. My entire family moved here from Manila, like started immigrating here since the 60s. And growing up in the Philippines, which was occupied by the United States for several years, through the Second World War, the US actually bought the Philippines from Spain. That was what the Treaty of Versailles meant. Is like, okay, Spain, you get Mexico, US, you get the Philippines, and France, you get Louisiana, like the whole Louisiana purchase thing. So then here we are now under the auspices of, American colonialism, and these kinds of embedded prejudices and systemic racism is commodified. It's commodified in our media. It's commodified in the way we see ourselves.
Oh,
The shades of whiteness is like, you go to Manila and there are shops there where like nail places will say, we can whiten your skin where the sun don't shine. There's this environment of fairness that is sold within the same country, where most people are actually brown, are told, but it's more beautiful if you were fairer. The association of fairness and superiority, boom, that's one part of the complex, right? And then added to that, you imbibe that, internalize that racism on yourself, and you start seeing that and practicing that among yourselves. So like I know that there have been conversations about the different shades of Blackness, like how Black are you? Are you Black enough? Am I fair enough? Like Filipinos who are brown skinned, who didn't used to be seen as more as beautiful as the fair skinned Filipinos. So we aspire to look at.
That's another thing we have in common, isn't
right?
that?
Right? That is the common thing among all of us. So we all like drank the Kool-Aid before Kool-Aid was even invented.
Yeah, because if you white, you right. If you Black, get back. If you brown, get down.
Oh, I've never.
And that's been around forever. Yeah, if you're white, you're right. If you're Black, you get back. If you're brown, get down.
Cool.
Yeah, or something. Yeah, it's some type of round. It's some type of like rhyme that they had going on. But I was teaching earlier today. I was teaching my students, and I was thinking about this talk that we were going to be having this evening. And I just thought to myself while I'm walking around the playground while they're having recess, and I was thinking like, man, we all kind of fell for this eugenics. There's this colorism not only amongst us, but our oppressor, and people don't really know, like Hitler got his eugenics ideas and stuff like that from America. You know what I mean? That wasn't his own shit. He inherited that shit from over here. He took those ideas, saw what the scientists were doing over here, and then just implemented that shit over there. America's very deeply rooted in eugenics. Eugenics, first place, second place, third place, all of that. Just like Marlina was saying, in both of our cultures, every people are bleaching their skin left and right because who wants to be on a losing team? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Who
wants to be eliminated?
The propaganda is if you're a heavily melanated person in North America, you're on a losing team. This is the winning team. Look at who's on the money. Look what's printed. You know what I'm saying? Like, we got to step back from the eugenics, from drinking that Kool-Aid of the eugenics and wanting to be, we got to think our parents and, I mean, we're just getting into the place where we're comfortable in our own skin and telling our children it's okay to be themselves, when just a generation or two ago we were saying you have to be like this white person, you have to be like this person to succeed. If you don't talk properly, if you don't do this, if you don't do that, then you're not going to have a chance in this rat race, in this eugenics race, which is America, you know?
And you, yes, and you, thank you for bringing up the idea of eugenics, because eugenics is the basis for a lot of immigration policies in the US. When Angel Island and Ellis Island were established, the protocol at the port of entry was based on and very similar to the kinds of requirements that Nazism had imposed in determining who was the perfect or more superior race or human being. So at the port of entry in Angel Island, Ellis Island, people were not necessarily being examined or questioned for why is the reason you want to come to America. They were trying to filter off the weak, the sick, the LGBT, the gay folks, the people that they thought did not have the features that would create America as a beautiful country. That was the standard. Eugenics was being practiced and extermination was already being practiced as a means to allow only the folks that we want in this country that look like us, and look like us, meaning the power that's being held is in the hands of those that should be the point of reference, which is whiteness. And so I think part of it is like, we get into each other's necks because our folks don't they don't measure up to that, because we're darker, whatever degree it is, we're darker. And yet when you come here, as I mentioned earlier, like the commodification of that has seeped into the culture way before you arrive at the port of entry. When I was growing up, I remember there was a comedian on television and her name was Angie. And there were 2 US bases in the Philippines during the war, because the Philippines was a perfect place to have flights in any direction because we're an archipelago. And so this young actress who was African Filipina was the result of a marriage between a white American serviceman and a Filipina. And she made into television, and I'm sure is very talented. But when I was growing up, I remember her figure, like all she had to do was enter the screen and they would turn on the laugh track. Just her walking to the screen causes a laugh track to be heard around the country. So what does that do to your brain? Every time I see a Black person, I think it's funny. She didn't have to do anything. She just had to be Black.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, the contrast of like, you go to Catholic schools and Jesus is white. Jesus, Jesus is fair skinned. So take those 2 contrasting impressions of 2 different races, and you're in between and you're brown. And then you come to America and you're still carrying that in your brain. And no matter how hard you try, you don't shake it off. And so I actually have a question for all of you, because I feel like racism, and this is just my personal theory, I'm not making any academic claims to this, but I just feel like racism isn't just a social thing. I think it's actually an illness. I think it's the inability to perceive someone to be human like you. In a way, if you think about, and
Marlina, how else could somebody who ain't never met you, ain't never talked to you, want to kill you? I want to say, how the hell is that possible? If somebody ain't never talked to you, ain't uttered one word to you, just the sight of you they want to kill you. That is a damn sickness.
Because there is decades of education subtle or not, that has already seeped into your psyche. And so, yes, like you don't arrive at this point just like that. You don't arrive at it by seeing one cartoon or one character or one person that did something. You arrive at it because there is this generational trauma that has been passed on to you. It's, you know, it is again, I make no academic claims, but I just feel like whatever our parents and our grandparents and our ancestors experienced, those genes are still in us. They say, you know, the genes, you as a woman, you carry your baby and your genes are there, but at the same time, your baby's genes and their cells stay in your body. Whether you gave birth to that child or not, those genes are still in you. And if you think about how powerful that is, that message is embedded into the synapses of your nervous system. It defines how you see each other. It defines how we see each other. And so that seemingly simple example of like this comedian who happens to be Black walks across the screen, you heard a laugh track, and so then that's my assumption or our assumption of it. But that just reinforces that whole assumption of who is the perfect human being. Immigration tries to define who the perfect human being is, who is deserving enough to stay and make a living in a specific country. How twisted is that? And where did that come from? In fact, I want to ask, like, where do you think that comes from? Because that's not anything that your parents taught. It arrives in our brain, in our mentality, without being told. My daughter, when she was 3, wanted a doll, and she wanted a Barbie doll, speaking of Barbie and Ken. And we brought her to Toys R Us, and I picked up you know, an African-American Barbie doll, and I handed it over to her. And mind you, like, we considered ourselves to be progressive parents, and she took this Barbie doll and started hitting it on the shelf and said, "This is not a Barbie. This is not a Barbie." And she started crying. And I remember my ex-husband said, "Okay, you get a Ninja Turtle instead. Like, no more Barbie dolls for you." But we didn't send that message to her. She got it somewhere.
Marlina, I was gonna talk about something about what you're talking about. Like, so one time when I invited my nieces over, right, and their mom kids, right, and then like, so hate is taught, right? Because like I didn't tell my nieces that Davida was African American. They came in and they like Davida right away. I didn't tell them anything. And then so it's taught. You know, like hate is taught. So you know, and they didn't think anything of it at all. They didn't were like, "Oh, Auntie, she's African American. You didn't tell us that," you know. So like, yeah, the topic of, you know, like what the community brings to society is about like color, skin color, that just because you're a different color, you're not white, you know, you're better, you know, that if you're white, you're better. We just really need to like focus on it and face it, right?
Right.
And this millions of us living in so close proximity across this country and around the world, we got to get it together. You know why? Because we're starting to outnumber our oppressor. And you know what's going to happen then? A whole bunch of bad propaganda. So y'all just get ready for it over the next 10 years. That's the reason why we got to start having these conversations amongst ourselves and not letting somebody else control the narrative and control the paradigm, who control the media, who can put this inside of your face and try to sway you. That's what I mean when I was talking about agents of agenda earlier.
Right.
You know what I mean? We've, like I'm telling you, this stuff is, it's really rough, you know, because everybody going through this in this experiment of America, being American or being whatever we are, American, like we always have to like, oh man, our communities are on our back. You know what I'm saying? Like, no, just saying like, there's never individualism. You know what I'm saying? When you deal with, when you're from our cultures inside of America, there's really no room for individualism, I feel like every move you make is you're making it for your community in a good way and in a bad way. You know what I'm saying? You know, there's good things about that, and then there's bad things about that. Right. You know what I'm saying? But like, yeah, like we gotta, you know, like, look how close we are. If we don't start having these conversations, the powers that be they're gonna pin us against each other any way they can. You gotta know that. You gotta know that, because all of the numbers, the so-called, and first of all, we're not even crayons, we're not colors, we're people with identities. You know what I'm saying? Like, we got to get off of that. We're not like yellow, you know what I'm saying? We're not a box of crayons. We're beautiful people of the sun. We're equator people. And those people of the sun and the people of the equator are going to basically, you know, be outnumbering the Northern Germanic tribes that are currently running the situations of America right now. They say before 2040, I think it's going to be happening right now. I'm a person who don't really believe in the census numbers. I believe that people are being exterminated because their numbers are too high. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, and we have to understand that the authority class is inside zero growth. For 10 years, for decades, they've been inside the zero population growth. This is a fact. Any of you guys can go and check these facts. They're not having babies quicker than they're dying. And that's the reason why they're killing us off. You know what I mean? I'm sorry, I got to really speak passion about this situation right here. But the fact that our oppressor has zero population growth has a lot to do with what the hell we're actually going through, because it's ramping up their destruction. It's ramping up a certain type of destruction, not all of them, but the ones who are trying to secure their kingdom, the White Castle. You know, you go buy burgers from hell. It's on the corner, you know, the White Castle, the White Kingdom or whatever. But what I just said is really true. Zero population growth. We are beginning to outnumber them. They still own the infrastructure. They're going to feed us negative propaganda. We're going to have to be wiser than that.
Yeah, basically, too, the fear they have is that we're going to do to them what they spent years and hundreds of years doing to us. There's not going to be enough of them they control, like David said, the infrastructure and things like that. But when it comes to sheer numbers of people, they're not going to be able to control as much as they think they can. But they're going to be afraid that we're going to do to them, we're going to persecute them the way they persecuted us. And that's their biggest fear.
So I'd like to, hopefully not too abruptly, bring in our participants and our audiences, because there's a lot of conversation happening in chat that I want to bring into the conversation. I do want to throw in one thing, which is a challenge to all of us, not just to Black and brown folks, to all of us, is it's not a them and us. It's like, it's just us. you know, whether it's white, brown, black, whatever, like the colors of
Right.
the rainbow or the box of crayons. It's not, you know, how do we turn into a community that's not them and us, but just us? So I see Haruka coming on. I know that you prompted me that was like 10 minutes ago, we should come into a Q&A. We now have 5 minutes left. So I do want to do justice to the folks that have been participating. Is there a specific question, Haruka, that you would like us to respond to, or do you want me to just go through what's in the chat?
I can ask questions so folks know whether their question has been answered or not. I have really been enjoying listening to your conversation. It's so refreshing just to be able to hear folks talk so candidly with each other. I think a lot of the times we see like very polished presentations, and it really just feels just really nice to listen to like a conversation between friends. So thank you so much for that. We'll start with a question from Babe Barton, I think specifically referring to something that David said. You shared an important statement, think about your own oppression. How can that be acted and followed up through your activism, advocacy related work?
That was for you, David.
How can it be followed up with your advocacy and your work? Just know that holding that space, you know, it's really having a higher level of tolerance. Really, it's understand, and it's not even. It's I'm only saying using that word tolerance for lack of a better word. It's like certain things that come from people that you know are under high stress and high angst. Are you going to judge them that quickly? You know, it's like, oh wow, this person is going through the same hell I'm going through. You know what I mean? This person is. It's a kind of like an identifiable factor. You do know it, and you do it, and it's just about actually having that patience. I guess, yeah, X the word tolerance, please replace it with a better term, patience and understanding.
And
That's
compassion.
and compassion, yes.
True.
Allowing yourself to grow and learn. You know what I'm saying? You know, even if you're I'm going to make it quick. I know we're going to be ending this soon. Even if you're fighting for somebody else's cause or a cause that it involves all of us, let's not be arrogant, and our information and our knowledge about certain things still hold place to hold our tongue and to be, you know, to be a part of it, not to head it, you know.
It might be useful. I'm looking at a response from two. And I want to just share it with everyone. I know most of you can see what's in the chat, but I think it also kind of references what the question was, the earlier question was. Two said, I believe that learning each other's stories is a way to understand, relate, and have compassion for the other. Definitely into the traditional storytelling circles. How are ways that we could create spaces to learn each other's stories, and what are ways we can get Asian and Black folks to show up in these storytelling places? Not just as community conscious folks, we know we'll show up for sure, but the Asian and Black brothers and sisters that need to be in these spaces to learn about each other.
The common folk, right? The everyday people, right?
Yeah, my racist uncle and my, you know, my prejudiced cousin. Like I want
the ones who ain't like having privilege to go to like a hip hop show or like, you know what I'm saying? And like, I mean, a lot of we take for granted the type of youthful life we live in the urban city where we're kind of already like working with each other. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, and inside that question, I would just say that like in hip hop, it's one of the only places where KRS-One said it. It's one of the only places where Dr. King's dream is actively, it's active. It's in use. It's in action. all of us playing together on the playground in the same sandbox and stuff, like hip hop as an art form and an institution. It welcomes all cultures. It's you know what I mean? And but even beyond that, how do we create those spaces? Yo, that's the $1 trillion question. Are we going to?
Uh-oh, David just froze up. I'm sorry, David, you just froze up. I'm gonna jump in. Oh, there you go. You froze up there
You
for a
froze.
while.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Were you doing that for dramatic effect?
Yeah, no, but as we leave this this event today, like we need to all be thinking about that, like for real, like how can we get our communities together, not leaving it up to assumptions, because not only do we care about ourselves, we care about each other, and we care about like each other's plight. You know what I'm saying? And we just care about knowing, you know, when you actually care about knowing somebody, this is somebody that's like technically your neighbor. Either we're next door neighbors or our communities are next door neighbors. Like we have to talk. We can't keep letting like little weird hiccups like mess up our everything. You know what I'm saying? And this is going to happen if we're not conversating.
Yep.
Marlina?
Yes.
Part of what we could do too is have a breaking bread ceremony, a communal dinner, because people bond around food. You know, we're eating each other's food anyway. So just rent out a huge space, invite the communities, and just share food and talk over food. Things get said when your stomach is getting full.
True.
You know, and just have one big communal meal.
Which is something that artist Seytu Jones did a couple of years ago. And if you all want to check out, like Seytu Jones, who's a local Minnesota-based artist, created a banquet across Victoria Avenue, which is in St. Paul, and invited everybody to the table. Yes, food in any places where we are feeling nourished on an equal footing, I think are those spaces where we can start to talk about and ask each other the difficult questions. I want to just share another question/statement from Tu, and then I think, you know, we're running into time here. And so I just want to read this. Tu says, I think creating a counter narrative of dark skin as beautiful and appealing amongst all cultures is important and resistant to how media teaches us that fair skin is preferred. For example, within Asian cultures, as I'd mentioned also before, to embrace darker skin instead of using products to lighten their skin or larger their eyes or make themselves taller or whatever, or whatever it is that we do to make ourselves look not black or brown. People that lighten up their skin look fake. People who embrace their natural darker skin tone color should be celebrated in media among families and taught to our future generations. What are effective ideas you think can create this counter narrative? And I think leaving that question with all of us throbbing in our midst, what are the effective ideas that you think can create this counter narrative? That's everybody's assignment. I'm now talking as a professor. That's y'all's assignment, even the folks that are listening. Do one thing tomorrow and think of an idea and then act on that idea. Doesn't have to be a difficult one, just one little thing at a time, because smallness creates bigness. So there you go. I'm looking at our bosses here because they're popping up and turning on their videos, which means it's time to go home. Oh, we are home. We're at school.
We're at home.
Oh, and you know what? And I'm glad that there's more questions. There's like more, everybody wants to talk, but you know what? It's starting. It's happening. You know what I mean? That means that conversation, if somebody didn't get a chance to express their question in this panel right now, they're about to get turned off the internet and talk to somebody else about it. Oh, I wanted to say this and I wanted to say that. And then here we go.
There you go.
You know, the good fight is starting to happen, you know?
That's right. That's what happened to us. I hope that's what happens to everybody.
Yes. Yes.
I'm feeling it. Oh,
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Passing on to you, Kong.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much for everyone that's here today, for attending and participating, and for being a part of this important conversation. Have a good night, everyone.